What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Payne. Welcome back to another Final Fantasy VII Evercrisis video. Alright guys, I want to do something a little different today. I want to talk about the history of the infamous Buster Sword and why I think that Angeal should in fact be the next character after Young Sephiroth to be introduced. So I'm going to go through a little bit of history of how the first owner of the Buster Sword is in fact going to be one of the more important characters to release and what kind of class I think he should be and why. Now, Cloud and the Buster Sword are pretty much synonymous with one another, and a lot of people don't actually know the Final Fantasy VII lore, so I kind of want to break it down with this iconic sword, because it's one of the first weapons you actually get, and there's a quest to upgrade it. So as you can see here, this is our boy Zack here, who currently does not possess the Buster Sword, and is not the original owner of the weapon, as a lot of people may think. There's actually another person right here, who stands up, who's Zack's mentor by the name of Angeal. Now, Angeal is one of the main characters in Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core and one of the first class soldiers and friends of Sephiroth and Genesis. Now, if you know nothing about the game, I'm going to break it down to you real quick. Angeal was part of Project G. It is a project that was side by side to Project S, which was Project Sephiroth. Project G was Project Jillian. And essentially, Project G was using Genova cells to create special soldiers. Now, Genesis and Angeal were quote-unquote foster brothers, right? And when Angeal joined First Class Soldier, his father actually had the Buster Sword crafted for him. Now, his father paid a lot of money. Unfortunately, due to working so hard and aging, his father passed away, finally paying off the Buster Sword. And in honor of his father, Angeal actually promised to never use the Buster Sword or use it as very little as possible to keep it from being rusted or nicked or damaged, because he knew how much his father cared about the sword and worked for it. So Angeal is actually the original owner of the infamous Buster Sword. So I'm going to show you guys how he essentially treated it, how he acted with it, how good he was with it, and why he passed it off to Zack, and eventually Zack passing it off to Cloud. So going into another scene. Alright guys, so this is going to be the first scene with Angeal and Zack that we're going to talk about. So this is their actual first mission together against Fort Tamblin, which is actually one of the missions that are in Final Fantasy Evercrisis in the Crisis Core storyline, as well as a Crisis dungeon. Now in this scene, you're going to see Zack notice that Angeal rarely ever touches or uses the Buster Sword. And in this case, you're going to see Angeal show respect and honor to the sword itself and explain to Zack why he doesn't use it. And I think it's important to note this, because if they ever introduce Angeal as a character, like you see here, he bows his head to it and puts it back, right? And this is where Zack mentions that I've actually never seen you use the sword. So I think if Angeal ever gets introduced as a character, which they should introduce him in the Crisis Core storylines as a playable character, we should see a new release of a Buster Sword that is in the hands of Angeal and not the same one that Cloud gets as 3 stars. We should probably see a 5-star version of this sword for Angeal. Alright guys, so this scene probably seems a little bit familiar to you. This is the scene where Zack fights in Fort Tamblin against one of the bosses. You guys know who these guys are because they're in Evercrisis already. And you can see here, he got a little bit surprised and knocked back and was about to get probably killed if it wasn't for the selfless act. You guys can hear the infamous sound coming from a massive sword from behind. There it is, the slash. Zack is surprised, and behind one of the anti-soldier enemies is none other than Angeal with this sword drawn out and used. And there you go, he says, that's one more you owe me. And this is the first time we kind of see Zack and Angeal's relationship, right? Mentor and student, and the Buster Sword is finally out. Look how easy he holds it, and it seems to be the case with anyone who has the Buster Sword. It's being held with relative ease for its massive size. And you can see here he says, sorry for the wear and tear, and this is where Angeal says, you're a little more important than my sword. Just a little. So that's the first time you get to see their relationship and the Buster Sword being used properly in the hands of the originator. Alright guys, so this is going to be a flashback in the Crisis Core storyline showing the relationship between Sephiroth, Genesis, and Angeal. And it goes back to showing Angeal not using the Buster Sword for anything more than a defensive weapon. At first, when they actually come together and do this little conversation, we're going to see a 2-on-1 battle with Angeal and Genesis versus Sephiroth. Sephiroth, of course, pretty much destroys every single attack they have at him by countering and going back on his own. But this is a proof here that Angeal values his sword, the Buster Sword, more than anything else. So I hope when they do introduce Angeal that he's one of the newer characters that come out soon, And because Angeal uses his sword in such a protective manner, in a manner where it matters more to save lives than it is to take lives, that it is going to be more of a tanking weapon. I'm actually very, very much wanting a character who can taunt, who can actually draw attacks, rather than it being a DPS check and that's who the opponent attacks, right? We need a true tank in this game, and I think Angeal would be the perfect one. You can see here, right? They're fighting Sephiroth together, and Sephiroth is doing it no problem, but Angeal has not touched the Buster Sword once even, because again, it goes back to that whole wear and tear, the honor for his father, and he just doesn't see a need for it in a sparring match. So again, just sitting in the back of there, and he's running around with it like it's ease, right? It's a heavy sword on his back with no problem. Here, obviously, Sephiroth taunts. They are no match for Sephiroth. The S Project created the perfect soldier in Sephiroth. These guys are from the G Project. They're, unfortunately, they are incredible first-class soldiers, but they're just not at the level that Sephiroth is. And you can see here Genesis specifically, who probably will be a character eventually as well, wants that title of hero. He is envious of his friend Sephiroth. And Sephiroth knows for a fact these guys don't stand a chance. And you're going to see here, this battle is going to pick up a little bit, and Genesis is going to throw in a few more heavy punches at Sephiroth, and Sephiroth will just scoff at it, right? You can see Sephiroth is not even trying. I don't even think he's even attempting to try right now. And Genesis is giving it his all. You really are noticing that Genesis is out for blood. He does want Sephiroth. He does want to be Sephiroth. It's kind of his goal. Where Angeal is different. Angeal is just more content where he is. He knows his place, and he's there to make sure that his friends and his family and his loved ones are protected and safe. And I think that's why Angeal will be the perfect next introduction as a character, and a new Buster Sword should be introduced as more of a protective tank weapon rather than a complete and other destructive tool of destruction, right? Which I think Cloud has currently anyways, and I think Zack could also have as well too. But I think Zack also, right there. See, watch now. Watch what happens. See, Genesis is just unhinged at this point, right? And you can see here, Angeal, even though it gets blasted in his face with the fire spell, Sephiroth's just cutting things up. You can see what happens here right now, right? They're literally destroying everything. And again, Sephiroth is unscathed, just no, like, so much confidence and zero worry about Genesis and his abilities to beat him. And this is what makes Sephiroth so powerful. Look at that, it looks like just cutting up carrots, like literally, or onions. And of course the infamous song comes on, right, for Sephiroth. And I think we're all accustomed to seeing this with Sephiroth, where he's just overwhelmingly powerful. And again, this is where it's important to note, right, where they're about to destroy everything. Angeal comes in here with, right there, stopping it. Using his Buster Sword finally to put an end to this. And again, using it to protect his friends, right? Very important to note that. He's there to protect his friends with the Buster Sword. It's the only time he uses it. So there's another scene right there, guys, that shows Angeal being a protector and a tank to save his loved ones. Alright guys, and the last scene here shows the final demise of Angeal at the hands of Zack. And of course, it's one of the more sad moments in the Crisis Core time. And Angeal is happy finally to have been beaten by his student, and hands off the infamous Buster Sword to the second owner, which is Zack. Now everybody knows this part, right? Zack is the quote-unquote original owners in our eyes when we first played Final Fantasy VII, because we get the flashbacks of a guy with black hair, spiky black hair, who holds on to the sword before Cloud ever gets it. So you guys can see here, protect your honor always. It always comes down to protecting your honor for Angeal. And I think Angeal should in fact be the next character to come out after Young Sephiroth. The reason why I say this is because Crisis Core only has one chapter in the story in Evercrisis. And I think Crisis Core plays such a big role in the Final Fantasy lore that a lot of people don't understand the background and the history of Zack, Angeal, Genesis, and Sephiroth. And I think this Buster Sword reintroduction as a 5-star with Angeal coming out and it being more of a protective weapon could be a great way to introduce a little more lore to the already heavy lore game that is Final Fantasy VII. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is Payne. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.